A wise man once said, "All we're ever asked to do in this life is treat our neighbor, especially our neighbor who is in need, exactly as we hope to be treated ourselves. That's our ultimate responsibility." Who said that? Fred Rogers. So I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, and I've only, I think now in adulthood, come to realize how influential he was actually on me and my generation. Just that simple awareness of our neighbor, the concept that we live in neighborhoods and why neighborhoods matter, that we ought to know the people who live next door, that the way we treat people actually is a holy thing. Of course, Fred Rogers didn't come up with this concept, and he, through his own Christian tradition, inherited our tradition from Leviticus chapter 19, words that come from this week's Torah portion. "Thou shalt not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Hashem, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." This line that Rabbi Akiva calls klal gadol b'Torah, an enormous principle, a founding principle of Torah, makes its way into another really important story in our tradition, and that is the story of the potential convert who comes to talk to two rabbis, approach them seeking a conversion to Judaism, and he goes first to Shammai and he says, "Teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing here on one foot." And Shammai, who was a builder by trade in addition to being a rabbi, happened to be holding a builder's measuring stick in his hand, and he chased the guy away with the stick, thinking, Torah is so important, how would you degrade Torah by asking me to teach you all of Torah while standing on one foot? The potential convert, not to be deterred, finds his way to Hillel. And Hillel answers the door, and he says, "Teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing here on one foot." And Hillel says, "Da'alcha snei lachaverach lo ta'avid." What is hateful to you, do not do to others. His version of our pasuk from Leviticus 19. Do unto others as you would have them do. What you don't want done to you, don't do to someone else. He says that's the entire Torah. Now go and learn. And he converts him. This central principle, this klal gadol, according to Rabbi Akiva, is, I would suggest to you, a universal impulse that comes out of our particular tradition. And it's a brilliant pedagogic move on Hillel's part, if you think about it, right? What better way to engage someone who wishes to be part of the community by letting him know that he, as a non-Jew, is worthy. He's worthy of love just by virtue of being a neighbor. Just by virtue of knocking on the door and saying, "I'm interested in learning," he is worthy of learning all there is to learn. He's worthy of being part of this congregation of Israel. But what if it's the wrong reading? What if that reading that makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside, but Mr. Rogers' reading of this text is incorrect? I'm not sure that it's self-evident that actually ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, means that everybody ought to love everyone else. And there are people who absolutely read it differently. The scholar, great biblical rabbinic scholar Arnold Ehrlich, 19th century, writes in his Notes on the Hebrew Bible the following: "The traditional explanation of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is both intrinsically and linguistically wrong. For in order to express the alleged meaning, it should have read avat nafshecha or kenafshecha instead of kamocha, like yourself, right? And not like your soul, like your being, and not who is like you. Besides, to love one's neighbor as oneself, if it be humanly possible at all, is not everybody's concern. And therefore, such a demand cannot be made by the Torah. For the Torah is intended for the man in the street, and not just for starry-eyed idealists. Ehrlich writes, in point of fact, kamocha is exegetical in relation to reacha, meaning my neighbor, and means the like of thee, which signifies in this context one who is like thyself, an Israelite. The foregoing b'nei amecha, that non-Israelites are exempt from this precept of neighborly love, is shown by the precept in verse 34, which otherwise would be completely superfluous. So here we have Ehrlich, who says, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha doesn't mean love your neighbor as you love yourself. It means love your neighbor who is like yourself. But if your neighbor is not like yourself, you actually have no obligation to love them whatsoever. What is Ehrlich saying? He's being honest about the human condition. Human beings are tribal by nature. We tend to have what social scientists call in-group, out-group distinction. This goes back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. If you live in this cave, and your buddy down the road lives in that cave, and there's a scarcity of resources, or you have a common enemy, a lion that wants to eat people, better the lion should eat the people in that cave than in my cave. Somehow we have to protect our own. We circle the wagons. It's our family. It's our religion. It's our race. It's our tribe. It's our city. It's our sports team. Whatever it is, we're going to root for this one. And maybe we don't bear ill will necessarily for our neighbor, but why should I have to love them? That's not human nature. That doesn't make any sense, to love everybody as you love yourself. Most of us have trouble loving ourselves, let alone loving other people. Ehrlich has a Shammai worldview. He's impatient with those who don't share his positions. He understands that Torah is meant to speak to all of us, not just the elite and not just the ones who have certain progressive sensibilities. And in some ways, this changes the entire Hillel story. It's no longer an invitation to all of us, but it's a gauntlet thrown down. Hillel offers a challenge if you read it through the lens of Ehrlich. Are you going to be like us, or are you going to be like them when he comes knocking at the door? Sure, you can ask me the chutzpah question, teach me the entire Torah while you're standing on one foot, but I throw it back to you. Are you going to go along with those people, or are you going to adopt this tradition? In some ways, in this context, when he says, go and learn, that's more important even than ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, because you need to learn our parochial tradition and move beyond whatever context you're coming from. In some ways, this makes sense, because Hillel in this moment, with this understanding, becomes the new, or this guy becomes the new Abraham, who's being approached maybe by a version of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Are you going to leave this pagan milieu? Are you going to go toward a more righteous path? And it makes sense if you know something about Hillel's past, because Hillel was Hillel HaBavli. He was Hillel the Babylonian, just like Abraham. He also left the exact same region of the world, and he came to the promised land, leaving behind his pagan roots, destroying his father's idols according to the Midrash, and coming to the land of promise where he could be part of a chosen people. That must be what the story means. We've been reading it wrong the entire time. Or have we? Maybe Ehrlich is wrong. Because another way of understanding Hillel is that he brought a worldly view to a more parochial Eretz Israeli society. What I want to suggest that's really going on here is not a difference in worldview about the nature of humanity. I think we can all agree that human beings can be selfish, we can be closed, we can be judgmental, we can be even hateful. Ehrlich is right, those are human qualities. But they're not the only human qualities. The disagreement here is not about the nature of humanity, the disagreement is about the nature of Torah. Ehrlich says Torah is intended for the man on the street, not just the starry-eyed idealist. He assumes the man on the street is meant to be placated. But I think the man on the street is meant to be challenged, is meant to be pushed, is meant to be held to a higher standard. Yes, he's right, it's not just for the elite. It's not just for the starry-eyed idealists, because the starry-eyed idealists don't need to hear this message as much. It's the folks who want to circle the wagons who do. It's the folks who want to say that cave to the lions and our cave for survival. Hillel understands Torah is a tool for uplifting people. It's a mirror to hold up to people, all people perhaps, so that they can see themselves clearly and therefore see also the path before them. Hillel is a great pedagogue, but not just because he sees the humanity and infinite value of every person, but because he sees the humanity and infinite possibility of our sacred texts. So with that in mind, I want to read for you a little bit more from the story. This is a book called the Talmud. It's just one of many volumes of the Talmud. I couldn't get the entire Talmud on this section of the Bima, but this is a portion of it. And I want to share with you a little bit of context that I think makes the case for my read, our read of Hillel's approach, and in fact Hillel's approach to Torah in general, which is about bringing a particular context into a universal context. This story of Hillel and Shammai and the potential convert happens in the context of a series of stories about Hillel and the character of Hillel. And what is the character of Hillel? What's the overriding attribute of this great sage after which student organizations on colleges have all been named? Why is it that he's a model for behavior, Jewish behavior, in non-Jewish contexts? The sages taught in a baraita. A baraita just means an older tradition, a Mishnaic period. A person should always be patient like Hillel and not impatient like Shammai. And then the Talmud relates that there was an incident involving two people who wagered with each other and said, anyone who will go and aggravate Hillel will take 400 zuz. Right? We're going to make a bet. If you can tick him off, $400. One of them said, I'm going to go and aggravate him. That day, he chose to bother Hillel was Erev Shabbat. It was Friday evening. So what are rabbis doing on Friday evening? Anyone who's ever tried to call me on Friday afternoon knows I'm a little hard to get a hold of, right? Because I'm getting ready for Shabbos, maybe with my family, maybe I'm finishing my sermon, whatever it is. It's a hard time to bother rabbis, but this guy says this is a great way to bother Hillel, who can never be rattled because he's patient. And he goes and he knocks on his door. Hillel is washing his hair. He went and he passed to the entrance to Hillel's house, and in a demeaning manner said, who here is Hillel, and who here is Hillel? Hillel wrapped himself in a garment and went out to greet him. So he gets out of the shower, puts on a towel, right? He said, my son, what do you seek? He said, I have a question to ask. Hillel responded, ask, my son, ask, unperturbed. So this guy, the agitator, asks, why are the heads of Babylonians oval? Now, of course, we know Hillel was from Bavel. He was a Babylonian. Not a very nice thing to say. He said to him, my son, you have asked a significant question. The reason is because they do not have clever midwives. You thought the Talmud wasn't funny, but it's actually funny. And so the man went and he waited an hour. And then after a short while, he returned to Hillel, and he says, "Where's Hillel? Where's Hillel?" And Hillel again comes and he wraps himself in a towel, and he comes out, and he says, "My son, what do you seek?" He said, "I have another question to ask." He said, "Ask, my son, ask." Not perturbed, the man said, "Why are the eyes of the residents of Tadmor bleary?" Hillel said to him, "My son, you have asked a very significant question. Because they live among the sands, and the sand gets into their eyes." And then the man went again, and he asked another question, and continues to agitate Hillel. And each time Hillel is not agitated, he's not perturbed, he's not upset. He just takes the man's questions in stride. And the man said, "I have many more questions to ask, but I'm afraid that I'm going to get you angry." Hillel wrapped himself, and he sat before him, and he said, "Whatever questions you have, I will answer." And the man who was trying to make Hillel angry, he got angry himself. And he says, "Are you Hillel, whom they call the Nasi of Israel, the leader of the community of Jews?" He said to him, "Yes." And the man responded, "If it is you, there should not be many like you in Israel." Hillel said, "Why are you saying this to me?" He says, "Because I lost $500 on a bet." 400 zuz. "Because of you." And Hillel says, "Be vigilant of your spirit. Hillel, I am worthy of having you lose 400 zuz. And another 400 zuz on his account. I'm not going to get upset." So then quickly I want to move us through where we get to our story, because all of this happens in this context of talking about Hillel's character. The sages taught there was an incident involving a Gentile who came before Shammai, the other guy. And he said to Shammai, "How many Torahs do you have?" He said to him, "2, the written Torah and the oral Torah." And the non-Jew said to him, "With regard to the written Torah, I believe you, but with regard to the oral Torah, the Gemara, the Mishnah, all these things, I do not believe you. Convert me on the condition that you will only teach me the written Torah." Now this is important because there were communities that held by accepting the written Torah and not the oral law that the Jewish people always understood as the secret decoder ring of the written tradition. So this is a challenging and offensive question. Shammai, of course, scolded him and cast him out and reprimanded him. And the same guy came before Hillel who converted him and began teaching him Torah. On the first day, he showed him the letters of the Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalid. The next day, he reversed the orders and told him that Aleph is Taf. And the convert said to him, "But yesterday you didn't tell me that." And Hillel said to him, "Didn't you rely on me yesterday? Therefore you should also rely on me." And in that way he was able to teach him also the oral tradition. There was another incident involving a non-Jew who came before Shammai and said to Shammai, "Convert me on the condition that you teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing on one foot." Shammai pushed him away with a builder's cubit in one hand. The same non-Jew came before Hillel, and Hillel converted him and said to him, "What is hateful to you, do not do to another." That is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary, Zeal Gemor, go and study. The stories go on a little bit longer. I'm not going to read all of them. But finally, we get to the conclusion of this lengthy narrative. A convert had come before Shammai, or potential convert before Shammai, and also before Hillel, and asked in a sort of interesting way, I'd like you not only to make me a Jew, but I'd like you to make me the high priest. And of course, Shammai pushes him away, but Hillel brings him in, he converts him, and then he tells him to go and actually study Torah. And eventually, of course, the guy learns that, well, the priesthood is an inherited tradition. Not every old Jew can become a high priest, let alone, somebody who's not been born Jewish. That's something reserved for those who happen to have been named Cohen or Katz or something like that. So eventually, how does it conclude? The three converts gathered together in one place, and they said, "Shammai's impatience sought to drive us from the world, but Hillel's patience brought us under the wings of the divine presence." Hillel isn't looking for people who are kamocha, like him, and therefore different than others. He sees that on some level, all people are kamocha. It's possible to read it the way Ehrlich reads it. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha may mean not only love every neighbor as you love yourself, but love your neighbor who is like yourself. But I think another level of that is to say that if we're willing to drill down, all of us are like ourselves. All of us were created in the image of God. All of us have infinite worth. We may appear different. We may have different cultural contexts. We may have different backgrounds. We are all kamocha. We're all human beings. And what's the key attribute for achieving this? Well, it's the attribute of savlanut, of patience. My friends, Torah is about providing a series of values and behaviors that move us toward holiness. Max spoke about Kedoshim tihiyu, you shall be holy. What does it mean to be holy? It means to be godly. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem, for I am the Lord your God. Some assume that that means that we should be different, and we are different. Since when is difference a bad thing? To be holy, though, is to believe in the holy possibility of others. Professor Ehrlich is right, of course. Torah is intended for the man on the street, for all of us. But I think he misses the point of what Torah believes we are to do with its accumulated wisdom. Being an or lagoyim, being a light unto the nations, means to apply particular Jewish values to universal contexts. We should be who we are. We should bring the robustness of our tradition wherever we go. That's what halacha is about. There's nothing wrong with that, and we should never apologize for it. It's good to be a people chosen for a particular context and for a particular task. Just as ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha means apply your particular experience of being human to your encounter with every other human being. Which brings us to my final point, and that is the best way to understand the Torah reading, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, is to read the Haftarah for today. Because what does God say to Amos in the Haftarah that Max chanted? Yes, I brought you out of Egypt, but I have a relationship also with the Ethiopians. I have a relationship also with other peoples of the world. My relationship with you doesn't mean I abrogate my relationship with them. I'm the God of the world. I'm the God of the universe. Just as each of us is created b'tzelem Elohim, in my image, in God's image. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is the single most important mitzvah in the Torah. It is a klal gadol b'Torah. I agree with Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because it's the single most difficult thing to achieve in the world. It requires a level of self-awareness that most of us struggle with all our lives. It requires a sense of self-love that many of us find hard to achieve. It requires a capacity for empathy that some of us largely lack. It requires a great deal of humility, of anivut. It's hard. But my friends, when has anything worth doing ever been easy? Shabbat Shalom.